welcome to Eliza the Chef. I am Eliza the Chef, and I just got done teaching a children's culinary class, so I'm sorry I'm a little bit late. Thank you for joining. I'm really excited to share this recipe with you today. This is a very down and Dutchy chicken bok bai. What the heck is bok bai, you might ask? Well, it's a slightly Dutchy version of pot pie. So instead of making a crust that goes on top of our chicken pot pie, we make noodles that go inside it. So it's like a glorified, delicious chicken noodle soup. This is the most hearty, most heartwarming thing I could think of to make. It's raining here in San Francisco. I'm not sure what the weather's like on the East Coast, but hopefully this is gonna bring a little love into your heart today and your home. Hope everybody's hanging in there. I'm gonna get started with the ingredients first. Here's what we're gonna need for that chicken bok bai. To start, we're gonna grab a couple stalks of celery. I've got a whole bunch here. You're really only gonna need 2 or 3 stalks of celery. I grabbed 2 hearty carrots. If they're a little small, use 3. And 1 large onion. White or red is fine. If you've cooked with me before, or if you watch some of my YouTube videos, you know this is called a mirepoix. This is the base of our soups, sauces. Almost everything I cook almost always starts with this. If it's a one-pot wonder, I've probably got these 3 ingredients in it. For our pasta, that's gonna be a little bit separate. We're gonna have some flour, we're gonna have a couple of eggs, and we'll have milk. That's gonna be part and parcel to our pasta. We're also gonna throw in a little bit of olive oil. If you're cooking a chicken pot pie with me today, you're also gonna want that protein. Chicken is great. You could absolutely substitute turkey. That would be delicious. And then I decided to throw in some frozen corn. If you've got some fresh, that's a gift. And I'll show you how to take this apart and use that too. Okay, beautiful. Now, of course, you're gonna want some salt and pepper. And like I said, some olive oil. We may also need some water to add to our pasta and a little bit of extra broth we're gonna need to make in our pot. We're gonna make the broth as we go. So here's what's gonna happen first. We're gonna start dicing and making some magic in our saute pan. You might hear from a distance, I've got some chicken stock boiling. If you have some of that, you wanna use that instead of water today, totally great, love that. But if you don't, no problem, water is gonna be perfect. Here's what we're gonna start with. We're gonna use that onion first. Go ahead and grab your knife. If you haven't watched my YouTube videos on how to chop these 3 ingredients, you can always refer back to them later. When we're taking apart our onion, we're gonna slice off that little bottom tail. Make sure you're saving these skins. They're part of our stock. Whenever you make a stock, you wanna hold on to those skins. Keeping the flat side down on your board, we're gonna dice up this onion by slicing it in half first, keeping that little hairy bit attached and getting rid of that outside peel. That peel, again, what I do is save these in a gallon bag. So my onion peelings, my carrot peelings, my celery tidbits, I throw them in a gallon bag, and when my freezer has a nice full gallon bag of veggie leftovers, then it's time for me to make broth. Now we're just gonna follow the lines here of the onion. See those little ridges? I'm gonna insert the tip of my knife into that and get that diced up. Beautiful. Give it a little swivel and a nice dice. Gorgeous. Save those onion peelings. One more time, I'm gonna dice right around the rainbow here. So inserting the tip of my knife, follow the ridges of the onion, and I slice and dice right on through. Now I give it a swivel, and I can dice my onion to little bits here. Magnifique, beautiful. Now I'm gonna switch gears for a moment here. I'm getting excited and getting carried away. Go ahead and put your onions off to the side here. We're gonna use those in a moment. If those onions made you cry the next time you chop them up, try throwing them into the fridge for 10 minutes before you chop your onion. Hot air rises, so if you keep it cold, it won't make you cry quite as fast. Now with our chicken, if you're gonna use that with me today, go ahead and grab 1.5 to 2 pounds of chicken. That'll make about 2 to 3 servings for you, okay? With your chicken, I do like to dry, anytime I'm searing off a protein, I like to dry it really, really well before I throw it into a hot pot. What we're gonna do with our chicken that's been drying, I'm gonna season it really generously with salt and pepper. There's not a whole lot of ingredients in our chicken pot pie, so this is really important to to jazz up what we got. Super traditional, super farmer, fresh, delicious. This is one of my favorite dishes to have at home. My mom used to make the best chicken pot. Well, she still does. She still beats me at this. I'm sprinkling a little bit of salt and pepper onto my chicken, and I'm still letting it dry a little bit here, you guys. There's two reasons for that. The reason we're trying to dry out the protein is because we don't want the water content to fight with the oil. It's gonna splatter a bunch. And we also don't really want the chicken to turn a funny color. If you let it steam instead of really caramelize and crisp up, then the water kind of gets in the way. The water tends to make it steam rather than fry. So I'm drying ever so gently. Beautiful. Got my chicken ready to go. You can absolutely use thighs. I'm gonna use chicken breast today. A tiny bit less fatty. So I'm gonna throw those down on my board, and I'm just gonna slice these, you guys, into long, thin strips and then into cubes. So I'm just slicing this chicken into long, thin strips like this. That's about the size of a chicken tender. And then I can stack those and dice them. You can absolutely clean off any additional fat. I'm gonna leave mine on because I like the flavor. And I'm trying to make this easy today. So dice your chicken into about 1-inch pieces. Beautiful. And as I move on to my second piece here, I'm gonna start heating my pan. Remember, it's really important anytime you're gonna sear off a protein, really important to heat the pan first, then add the oil, let that get hot so it evenly cooks, and then we'll add our protein in. So I'm turning my pan on to high. If you've got a stock pot readily available, that's what we're gonna use today. Perfect. I'm gonna go ahead and keep dicing. It sounds like my stock is on a roll over there, so let me go turn that down. Ooh la la! Fabulosa! Pot should be over medium-high heat, getting it warm before we add in the oil. My chicken's being diced into 1-inch pieces. Now, a lot of recipes actually will call for a whole chicken. You'll throw the whole chicken into a giant stock pot and cook it in water. Then you'll save that broth, reserve it for the chicken pot pie, and then shred the whole chicken. I think that this is an easier, more approachable take, and it also saves a little bit of cleanup later. So I've got my chicken breast. I'm dabbing again. I'm really kind of obsessive compulsive about keeping my protein dry before I saute it. Add in a little bit of your oil. We're gonna let that get nice and warm. I'm using about 2 tablespoons here, okay? Then all we have to do is add in our protein. The goal here is to get the chicken caramelized on the outside, and then eventually it'll start falling apart the longer it cooks. So you can hear there is still a little bit of moisture left on my chicken. It's starting to make a sort of sizzling sound. Add that on in, and then let it sit. Don't touch that for a little while. Let it crisp up and caramelize. I'm gonna move my board out of my way and get myself a fresh one. Magnifique. Beautiful. So let me just run through what we've done so far. I diced up my chicken and I added it to my pot. Next, we're gonna work on dicing the rest of our mirepoix. What I have for you today is my onions, carrots, and the celery. So we're gonna get working on those in just a moment. My chicken is frying away in this pot, and I'm gonna give it just a little stir. If it loosens up from the pot for me pretty easily, it's ready to get turned. If it doesn't, then it's gonna need a little bit more time to caramelize. Yeah? I'm trying to get a nice skin on the outside, a nice golden brown skin on the outside of that chicken. I'm ready to move on to my carrots now. So far we've diced up our onion. That was step 1. Now we're gonna dice up those carrots. I'm gonna take off the tops and take off the ends. Oh, we have a question. What can I help with?
What drink pairs well with this dish?
Oh my God, any beer in the world would be great, particularly Dutchy German beer. Or wine, or really anything high in alcohol content. So I'm gonna take these carrots. Again, if you haven't watched my YouTube video about this, I don't peel my carrots. I leave them as they are. You can if you want to. We're gonna slice those guys in half. And now I'm gonna give these a little quarter turn. I like to have my carrots stay relatively large. I really like rustic look for this carrot. So I'm gonna keep them in just half moves. Dicing them about a quarter to a half inch thick. And I'm gonna do the same for all 4 of my carrot pieces. I'm using just 2 large carrot pieces for my 2 to 3 servings. My servings are Dutchy size, so they are really large. Beautiful. Again, using the bridge, I'm turning these carrots into flat pieces. So the reason we use carrots is because they are cheap, they're readily available, but they're super nutritious. And for me, I love cooking with things like carrots and sweet potatoes because they add such a depth of sweet flavor. You could totally add a bit more carrot. If you're a carrot fanatic, you absolutely could use a little bit more. But just that quickly, we've got our carrots ready to go. Again, keep them rustic looking. You can keep them nice and thick like that. We love it. And my chicken's starting to sear off here. It's looking good. You can see there's just a little bit of color starting to form for us. We like that. Just a little golden brown. But I'm getting impatient. I need to let it rest a little bit more before we keep turning it. I hope you guys forgive me. My apron is driving me up a wall. I'm going to tie it really quickly. Okay, so our carrots are going to go into our bowl with our onions. That's the second part of our mirepoix. And now we're going to work on our celery. Let's talk about celery for a second. This funny veggie is super packed with flavor, but it doesn't have any calories. So it's kind of an amazing ingredient to add to just about anything. But in our mirepoix, it's going to add a little bit of crunch, and it's going to add a kind of a bright, bitter flavor. If you've never done this before, I really encourage you, taste some of those celery heart leaves. Those are super delicious. I save these as a garnish for a lot of different ingredients or a lot of different meals. And I also throw them fresh, just raw, into salads. I think they're really awesome. If you end up getting rid of these, make sure you save them for your stock later. Now when we're dealing with celery, that's another thing that we're gonna send you to my YouTube channel for. But go ahead and line your celery up horizontally. Take off about 1.5 inches on the end. And at the top, you're gonna look for the arms or where the branches start to climb out here. We're gonna slice those off too. That's gonna go into our compost stock bowl. Go ahead and slice these guys in half as well. And then you can line these guys up. Mine are relatively large, so I'm gonna give them another cut in half. I've got 4 little celery spears ready to go. And again, I like to leave this a little bit rustic. I like to have nice big chunks of carrots and celery and onions in my pot pie. Totally up to you. Go ahead and give your celery a dice. And in just a few moments, we're gonna be ready to add these veggies into our pot. Give your chicken another check. Make sure that it's looking really golden brown. Oh yeah. All right, people, we're working it. It's looking good. It likes to stick to the bottom. It's starting to smell really nice. Beautiful. So here's what I'm going for. See this beautiful golden brown color or sear we got? That's what I'm talking about. I'm going to let this chicken cook just a moment more, and we're gonna add in this mirepoix mixture. This is super simple, you guys. Don't overthink it. It's chicken and some mirepoix. Chicken pot pie is a really easy to throw together dish, but it's just so heartwarming and comforting. I'm gonna throw this in now, and the onions and the carrots are gonna start sauteing with that beautiful chicken jus we just cooked out. Same with my celery. I'm gonna give this some time to really cook down and let it chill out for a little bit. While that does that, let me show you how to handle corn on the cob. And I'm going to show you why I'm using corn on the cob in a second. This is actually kind of a cool trick. So I know a lot of this is starting to become available in your grocery store right now. So I just love using it. Corn doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of health benefits, but it sure is delicious. And it's starchy. So it's gonna be kind of a saving grace for our broth. It's gonna add a little bit of thickness. And of course, my favorite, a little bit of sweetness. So I get all those beautiful silks off. Whenever I smell sweet corn, it reminds me of summer. This is my job as a little kid, hanging out in my backyard and shuck corn. If we haven't met before, you don't know that being in Amish country is a part of my upbringing. So welcome to my home. Okay, I took off my silks. I'm ready to get chopping. If the corn on the cob is really unmanageable, really large, you don't have to handle the whole thing. You could cut it in half and then follow these directions. I'm gonna use the whole cob. I'm gonna start about 3/4 of the way up and just slide my knife right through. Some of these corn kernels are gonna get away from me, that's okay. Try to line your knife up right up against the cob, the really hard part. The knife will kind of guide you. If it's difficult to cut, just come away a little bit. The corn kernels should just gently fall off. You should be able to slice right through like wrapping paper here. Turn your corn on the cob on its head, and then we just go around and get those last little bits. Beautiful. Now, here's the pièce de résistance. The best part about this corn on the cob is actually its cob. If you throw this into your pot while your broth is coming up to a boil, some of that starch is going to start to release, and that's going to be super delicious in thickening our broth. I'm throwing it right into my pot. I'm going to do the same with my corn. Get that on in there. Beautiful. And we're going to let that start to cook down. Gorgeous. I'm going to give another pinch of salt. When I say a pinch of salt, that always means a 5-finger pinch. Nice big pinch. Salt's really, really important in our cooking, you guys. It wakes up your taste buds and gives you so much more flavor. There's a lot of science behind that, which I won't get into just yet because I'll get carried away. What I'm looking for in my pot here is for my onions to start to caramelize just a little bit. They haven't done that yet, so I'm going to turn my heat up a little bit higher. I really want them to soften just a bit before I add in my broth. Now, if you don't have it at the ready, go ahead and grab yourselves about 6 cups of water. You can have that ready to go in a pitcher, and we'll use that in a few minutes when we add it to our broth here. Now, I'm going to be using some fresh herbs, so I'm saving those for the end. If you're using dry herbs today, like Italian seasoning, dried rosemary, dried thyme, you could throw a nice teaspoon of that in now. If you're not using those, save your fresh herbs until the very end. I love to put those in at the very end. It keeps the flavor bright, and it helps to keep a green color on your herb. Okay? So I'm going to give my board a quick clean, and then we're going to get going here. Beautiful. So I went through that quite quickly. If you're still with me, what we want to make sure we have in our pot is onions, carrots, and celery. Mirepoix, that's the basics. After that, we also do have that seared chicken. Our very first step was searing off the chicken breasts, chicken chunks if you were using turkey, same thing. And then we threw in a little bit of sweet corn to help add a little depth of flavor, a little crunch. Now I see a lot of juice is starting to cook out here too. You can just barely see it starting to bubble up around my veggies here. That's beautiful. Look at that. Look at that, it's like Thanksgiving in a pot. Oh my God. Now the longer your chicken cooks in here, the more it's gonna start to shred up for you, which is exactly what we want. We want a little bit of chicken in every bite. Perfect. The next thing we're gonna start on is my favorite. Make sure you have a nice tidy space here. We're gonna start working on that pasta. The pasta is just gonna take a little bit of flour. I'm gonna use 1.5 cups for 2 servings. So do the math however much you want for that. 2 eggs, that's for 2 servings. So 1 serving, 3/4 of a cup flour, 1 egg. 2 servings, 1.5 cups flour, 2 eggs. And again, these are Pennsylvania Dutch servings, so they're gonna be pretty ginormous. I've also got about 1/4 cup of milk ready to go. You can totally substitute water if you prefer, but I like the richness the milk provides. And we're also gonna want our olive oil and our salt. Off we go. The flour is going to go first. I'm going to use a food processor today because that's the mood I'm in, but you absolutely can just do this in a bowl. It'll just take a little bit more time to knead it and bring it together. I'm going to use my food processor to make my life a little easier. So 1.5 cups flour. I'm using all-purpose flour. Feel free to test out what gluten-free flour can do. I know some of our friends are trying that out today. Or you can absolutely substitute whole wheat flour if you'd like. It's just going to take a little bit more moisture. Now, if you've cooked pasta with me before in one of my other follow-alongs, we use a flour called semolina. We're not going to use that today. This flour, just all-purpose flour, is going to give us a bit more of a fragile, delicate dough. And semolina, I usually save for Italian pastas. So we've got our 1.5 cups flour. I'm going to add a nice big pinch of salt again, as always. This is just how fast and easy it is to make pasta, you guys. So beautiful. I'm then going to add in a teaspoon of olive oil here per serving, so 2 teaspoons. So far we've got 1.5 cups flour, 2 teaspoons olive oil, nice hearty pinch of salt. Now I'm going to add in my eggs. Let me show you how I break those up. I'm going to give them a little tap on something hard, and then with one hand I like to crack them open this way. That's going to go in my compost. If you're growing a garden, save your eggshells. They're really good to plant with your herbs and veggies. So many weird fun facts today, Eliza. I know. Beautiful. All right, we've got our eggs in now too. The very last step is to add the milk, but we'll wait till we put the lid on to do that. If you're making this in a bowl instead of in a food processor, add your dry ingredients first, give them a whisk, then add your eggs to the center of the bowl in a little well, and then you can start kneading it just like you would Italian pasta. We would do the same thing. So we would add the milk in instead of water. Food processor lid is going on now. Gently turning this guy on, letting it come together. We're going to slowly drizzle in that 1/4 cup of milk. Start with a little bit. You can always add more. It's hard to take away. You can see it's already starting to come together. Look at that. Magnifique. Beautiful. We're looking for a nice, kind of golden colored pasta dough. That came together really fast. Super cool. I'm going to use a lot of flour to dust my surface. I'm going to use this surface right here. Take another peek here at my chicken Popeye starting to come together, and the onions have started to soften. I can see they're starting to turn translucent, which is exactly what we want. Gorgeous, darlings. Now, if you're adding in a little bit of a dry herb, now is the time to do that. A little bit of Italian seasoning, a little bit of dry thyme, throw that in. If you're not, what we're going to do is save our fresh herbs for later. Grab about 2 tablespoons of butter. Trust me. We're going to throw this into our broth now. And I'm going to add in my chicken stock. You can absolutely add in water instead. So I'm going to melt this butter while I grab my stock. The butter, I'm just nestling right in there. About 2 to 3 tablespoons is great. And then I've got 4 cups of stock ready to go. Here's the deal, you guys. We've already put our chicken and mirepoix into our pot. So if you're adding water now, it's actually going to create a stock for you anyway. I've basically created fortified stock because I'm using chicken stock. You're going to want 6 cups of liquid. So I've got 4 cups of chicken stock. I'm going to add another 2 cups of water and bring it to a boil. Yes.
Curry?
Ooh! Is that the Madeline Mayday because she's the brightest? Oh my gosh, what a nice question. You could absolutely add curry powder, but here's the deal. In Amish country, curry powder is not readily found. So I could absolutely encourage you to add a little bit of curry in a hurry. That would be delicious, but it wouldn't be quite as traditional.
The question came from Amish country.
Oh my gosh, how incredible. Of course it did. Oh, Papa, how lovely. So we've got our broth is going to come up to a boil here shortly. Look how rich it's starting to get. The butter's melting and making it just a little bit thicker. The corn husk is also going to help us out with that. I'm going to help us out a little bit too, and I'm going to move this pot over to my stovetop where it can get a little bit hotter, a little bit faster. So again, 6 cups of liquid. We're going to bring that up to a boil. Gorgeous. You're going to want enough liquid in the pot to cover all of your ingredients by at least 2 inches. You may need to add a little bit more liquid as we go because we're gonna be cooking the noodles right in that stock pot. So it might be helpful to have a little bit more stock or a little bit more liquid at the ready. Moving some of the stuff out of my way so we can roll our pasta dough. Okay. Now these noodles are super fun. They're gonna come together pretty quickly. Let me grab my spatula. I'm gonna need a lot of flour for this dough. This is a super rich dough because it has those egg yolks in it. If you prefer to just use egg yolks and skip the whites, you absolutely can. Now this dough's kind of sticky, so I'm gonna flour my surface quite a bit. If you want, you can absolutely use store-bought egg noodles instead. What's the fun in that? If you're using store-bought noodles, those would go in as soon as your pot comes up to a boil. And the egg noodles are the kind of traditional part of chicken pot pie. The super wide, thick egg noodles that look like square shapes are the best. All right, got my sticky dough out here. This is gonna require a lot of flour, but you'll see that this gets pat into place pretty easily. It's a little bit different than the pasta dough we've cooked in the past when I was making ravioli with you guys. What? So lovely. I'm just gonna give this a quick knead. It only needs a little bit of pressure and tension here. Basically, if you've ever had chicken and dumpling soup, this is the Dutchy version of that. I'm still thinking about that curry. That's such a good idea. Yes, you could put curry in there. Steering away from the traditionalist method. All right, so I'm just gonna knead this for about 2 minutes. And then we're gonna roll it into a long, flat square. The noodles are usually shaped like squares, so we're gonna follow that pattern. If you have a pizza cutter or pasta cutter, you can use that. I'm just gonna use a knife. And if you don't have a rolling pin, a wine bottle works just as well. I'm sure some of you have already emptied some of those, so they may be lying around. Perfect. Does anyone have any questions so far? All good? All good in the hood? Delightful. So this pasta dough came together really quickly. Once again, it was just 1.5 cups flour, 2 eggs, 2 teaspoons of oil, pinch of salt, and we used that was actually only about 3 tablespoons of milk. Depending on where you're living and depending on how wet it is outside, your pasta dough may require a little bit more liquid. Perfect. I'm just gonna roll this puppy into some square-ish shapes here. Now make sure it's not too sticky. If it's really, really sticky, it's gonna stick to your cutting board and then it's gonna be impossible to dunk into your chicken broth mixture. I'm gonna roll this out nice and thin. I'm trying to get it about the size of my cutting board. So we're going for a square that's about 12 by 12 or 14 by 14 roughly. And that's for just my 2 servings. We're trying to get it nice and thin, about a 1/4 inch thick. Not much thicker, because I'll tell you, you can see it's already starting to kind of pull back. These pasta squares are definitely gonna cook off pretty fast and they're gonna plump up and get really thick when they hit the liquid, which is my favorite part about chicken pot pie, the noodles. But the thinner the better here because they are gonna about double in thickness once they hit that liquid and get to boil. Beautiful. All right, you guys, a little touch more flour here. A touch, she says. Oh, I'm feeling very extravagant today. It's a nice coating here. We're gonna cut this into squares. Now, please do not feel like you have to make perfectly asymmetrical shapes here. We're just going for about 1 by 1, 1 inch by 1 inch slices. Magnifique. And then these squares, if you have some kind of funky edges, you can just re-roll this dough. We didn't work it very much, so it's definitely gonna come back together easily for us. But for us here, this is why a pizza cutter would be a good idea. We're just gonna cut them into little 1 by 1 squares. And again, you don't have to be perfectly precise about this, okay? Let me grab myself my sheet tray to throw these on. You have a sheet tray nearby. That's nice to pop these onto for your gorgeous chicken pot pies coming up to a boil. I hear mine, it is starting to boil already. It's good news. Just throw your little squares on here. They're slightly different sizes. That's okay. That's okay. What we're going to end up doing is dropping these little squares in kind of one by one into the broth. Otherwise, they're going to stick together. So again, here we go. Slicing that pasta into squares. Spacing them out relatively nicely. Mine are all kind of different shapes right now. Beautiful. So if you're following along, your pasta dough should have been brought together by now. And we can quickly cook this off right away. So the pasta's only going to take about 3 minutes to cook. Oh, we have a question. Go ahead.
Is this your favorite Dutchy dish?
Oh, this is by far my favorite. I mean, shoe fly pie is a close second, to be fair. But yes, 100%. My mom makes the best chicken pot pie. To be fair, we would always buy the noodles. So it was a challenge to be able to make this my own version with homemade noodles. But I just love it. It's so heartwarming. And it's just such a lovely thing. If you want, you can actually you could take a lot more time cooking this. I did the abbreviated version here. But if you had a Dutch oven, you could absolutely cook this low and slow. My dad would do that. Cook it on our incredible coal stove for hours and hours and hours. This is so therapeutic for me. I hope you guys are enjoying doing this, or even just watching at home. Making pasta is so easy. And it just is such a nice little food therapy in these crazy times. So I've got my pasta squares, just that fast, you guys. That easy. Again, any stragglers, any that have like a really ridiculous shape, you can re-roll that dough. Got our little squares here. Beautiful. Now, again, I hear my pasta boiling. My bok choy boiling over there. You can rework this if you want to. That feels like more than enough for us to have for dinner. Let me grab my pot and bring it to show you. My hands are rinsed. Let everybody catch up here. Gorgeous. Ooh la la. Check it out. So here's the deal, you guys. Look at how beautifully thick and rich that got. The corn already has done some of its work there. Pretty beautiful. You can see how rich the broth is and how it's sort of the starch has started to thicken up already. Again, we may need to add a little bit more liquid as we go, but I'm going to drop my noodles in, kind of one by one here, and let this come up to a boil again. The reason I'm dropping them in really carefully is because I don't want them to stick to each other or kind of sink to the bottom and get stuck to the bottom of my pot. But this only needs a few more minutes to cook these noodles off. You want to make sure you're, obviously for something like this, the longer you give the broth to really incorporate all those flavors, the better. This is the abbreviated fast version. But you can let this keep cooking. If you were going to let it keep cooking for a while, you would need to add a little bit more liquid and wait till closer to the end to boil off those pasta noodles. These are not crazy fragile and they're quite thick, so you could let it cook down a little bit longer if the noodles already went in there. But like I said, if you're trying to really let the broth cook down and incorporate a lot of the flavor, you'd want to wait a few more minutes. Probably give it about at least half an hour to cook down. Oh my God, looks so good. Let me give it a stir quick. I feel like my Dutchy phrases are already coming out. Give the pot a stir quick. Look at how beautiful this is. Oh, I can hardly handle it. I'm gonna eat this whole pot by myself in a corner. It's happening. Come back, come visit again. Look how beautiful this is. Look at that. My bye-bye. All right, we're gonna let that cook a little bit longer. Don't eat the corn cob, that's just there to help thicken up our broth. All we have to do now is get our herbs in. So if you have some fresh thyme, I got a little bit of fresh oregano from our garden. You can throw in the whole half bunch if you want, and the leaves will just fall right off if you let it cook for about 5 minutes more while the pasta finishes. Here's my trick. If I'm using a bunch of thyme like this, I take one of the more flexible ones and I wrap it around like I'm tying a shoe. And then it should stay together pretty well for you. Tuck that in a corner of the pot. Try not to move it too much. And then the leaves should fall off. You should get some of the flavor, and then you can pull that whole bundle right out. Okay, beautiful. If you wanted to, you could also chop up some fresh parsley. I've got some already chopped from my last class here. We're gonna toss that in at the very end to give it some bright flavor. Fresh herbs you want to save till the end, again, because you want to keep the color, and they'll turn a little bit brown and bitter. So I'm going to make sure we reserve those for the very end of cooking. Beautiful. I went through that quite rapid fire. Are there any other questions out there about this bot pie making? In under 40 minutes, we made some beautiful chicken bot pie. I'm kind of impressed with us. That was super awesome. What you're looking for these noodles is for them to really maintain an al dente texture. So we're going for a little bit more of a chew. You can see they're already floating quite a bit. I'm gonna add a little bit more liquid to my pot because these are really starting to pull some of the broth. The more the noodles cook, the more they're tugging in some of that liquid. I'm just gonna add a little bit more. Just enough to cover. Make sure it stays at a boil while it's cooking. We are just about ready to eat here, people. Oh my God, it looks so good. Now, the way to test, make sure your chicken is softened. If you give it a little punch, it should kind of delicately fall apart. Ours needs a little bit more time to cook. And those bot pie noodles are just about done. You can always taste one. Give it a feel. This one feels like it's not quite done. Here's what we're looking for. See how in the center there's still some kind of wet looking ingredient? Sort of looks a little bit like a sponge. You want that to cook out a little bit more before your noodles are finished. It should be all one color and one texture. But no harm in trying right now. I'm gonna add a pinch more salt. I'm gonna let that cook for another 5 minutes. When you're ready, again, toss in your fresh herbs, and you've got a complete and beautiful dish. Thank you guys for joining me today. This was super fun. I'd love to hear if you enjoyed the Wednesday class a little bit more than the Sunday. And if you have any suggestions for new recipes you'd like us to try, I'm so game. I know this was a simple one, but I hope it warmed your heart and home today. I hope you enjoyed the cooking, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks for cooking with me. I'm Chef Eliza. Happy cooking, you guys. Enjoy.